listening, or, you know, maybe wait until you're in a better frame of mind to listen to this show, because this information has already sent people into near breakdowns, seriously. So I also want to say that, you know, while podcasts are not without their issues, you know, I did listen to our guest tonight being interviewed on the show last. Okay, we're back on. And as I was saying, if you caught what I had said, is that we don't really have a backup system here. And so if I get dropped, then I can't really get back on. Now, I was dropped, but fortunately my Skype saved it. I was able to get back in. So hopefully we won't have any more problems. And like I was saying, this is exactly the type of thing that was happening last night on the show. So it's a little strange. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get our guest on the line. Again, we might have more problems there. Let's hope not. So I'm going to go ahead and throw some music on, and we'll see if we can't work this out. Hold on one second.
Yes, coming in loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm hoping that the listeners can hear you, too. I had to get through to you on a different way that I perhaps normally would. I had some problems with the show, you know, and it was uncanny because I was just talking about how when I listened to the show last night, they were having some problems too.
Right.
So it's pretty unusual. But I have explained a little bit about what is coming, and I've kind of forewarned everyone that this is pretty serious information, and that you're here to help us understand what it is, some of the astronomical data, and the implications, and kind of what we need to know in order to survive a catastrophe. And so, Terrell, I will go ahead and hand it off to you, but what I want to ask first really is for people who don't know anything about this, could you explain kind of, you know, the official explanation is that this is a comet. And, you know, if you could explain why we kind of know it isn't a comet, and, you know, before we get into, like, the trajectories and things, just so people know kind of what we're talking about and what astronomers are seeing, or more to the point, what they're not seeing out there.
Okay. The reason we know this is not a comet for sure is because of the seismicity that's associated with this object since 1965. Whenever you run the timeline back for this object using the Jet Propulsion Laboratory data, then you see a pattern of earthquakes that's being caused, not just earthquakes, but magnitude 6+ earthquakes. For example, on February 27th, 2010, we had the Chile quake, and the Earth axis shifted 3 inches, and the Earth aquifer shifted. And the same thing happened on March 11th with the Japan quake. Earth axis shifted 4 inches, and the Earth aquifer shifted. Again, the same exact way, and exactly on L&N alignments with the Earth. So in other words, whenever Earth passed between the Sun and this object, we had those events. And so Minshur Amobashich, in his paper on seismicity, he did the research, and he has shown us, when you go back in time, that this has happened before. And so we're seeing a pattern. And in my research, I tried to explain it a different way with another object like Jupiter or Saturn or something, and I have no other explanation for it except for this L&N object, which has to have great mass in order to create these events. And then we have the problem that we cannot see it. And if we can't see it and it has great mass, then it must be one of about 3 things. And it can only be about 3 things. It's either a brown dwarf star, or it's a black dwarf star, or it's some kind of black hole anomaly. And so in our research, I've said in many groups studying this since January, in Astral Patriots research group, and that evolved into the research group we have now. We've been working with astronomers, giving them data, giving them the coordinates, and having them bring us information. And we're about to be breaking something, it looks like, with our current group. More and more people are able to see what's out there, and it is not a comet. There's something else out there for sure, 100% for sure, and it's something that has large mass, And whenever our people see it, then they become very frightened of what they see.
Well, sure. And what I want to do too is you know, like I said, I'm not sure. I'm sure people can probably hear me. I'm not sure if they're hearing you, just because of how we had to. I had to end up calling back in, and you know, the lines are a little bit crossed over here, so to speak. So I want to make sure that everyone is hearing you. You know, I don't want them to miss it. So
yes, they're definitely hearing me. I'm hearing from our research group. They're listening to the show.
Okay, fantastic, because I just want to make sure that the information is getting out there. Now, I know that there was some talk about, is it a photon cloud that might be surrounding this? And what are the indicators that people are seeing of that around this mass?
Yes, our solar system has too many photons right now, and it's because of the approach of this dwarf star. So this dwarf star did not have sufficient mass to implode and ignite. So when it imploded, then upon itself there was no ignition. It continues to release the photons. It sounds something like, so the photons are going everywhere. That's how it's shedding its outer skin. But there's no ignition. And so the extra photons, when it's far away from our inner solar system, is not a problem. But as this thing got nearer, then it started influencing the orbits of comets and asteroids. That's why we're having an overabundance of them crashing into the sun. It's because they're being moved by this approaching star and the extra photons. It's also affecting our atmosphere. It's causing our magnetosphere to collapse. Extra photons, that's fuel for the sun. So it's also candy for the sun. So the sun's eating up the extra photons, and it's becoming more active, which is causing more activity on the Earth. So we're getting a double whammy.
Yeah, and it seems like that could even, you know, cause solar flares, which, you know, really at the right angle would be really disastrous for us as well.
That is absolutely true, and that's what's going to happen a little bit later in the timeline. When the object now, pardon me, is a little bit below the ecliptic plane. It's coming at a 1.84 degree. It's negative. It's coming out of Leo, and whenever it reaches to the side of the sun, then it's going to begin. That's about September the 1st. It's going to reach Mercury orbit, and whenever it does, it's going to be very near the ecliptic plane. It's going to begin pulling those solar storms right out of the side of the sun on the left side. It's approaching from the left side, and the sun turns from our left to our right. So we're expecting to be bombarded with solar storms. The perigee date is 9/11, and that's the time that the object passes from the southern ecliptic to the northern ecliptic, and that's also the time that it reaches maximum velocity. So it's picking up speed every moment that it's heading towards perigee, and it's getting nearer and nearer to the ecliptic plane. And when it reaches Mercury orbit, that combination is going to cause the solar storms to begin, if they haven't already started before then. But each day that passes, it's going to be closer to the ecliptic plane. And whenever you get the equatorial storms, that's the ones that affect the Earth.
Okay, I want to explain real quick. Now, this is my understanding, and you know, feel free to correct me because I am no expert. But you know, our solar system is kind of, you know, it's actually a little bit at an angle, I guess. But if you were to look at it like it were flat, like you were holding a sheet out, maybe like how you do when you fold them, but maybe not super tight or taut. And if you put something heavy on it, like, you know, a cue ball, that's the way that the sun sits in gravity in our solar system. And then this trajectory, the Elenin comet, or really most likely, you know, a brown dwarf or you know, something, you know, bigger, dark star, or let's not hope any kind of a black hole, really. But that's going to be, now, am I correct in thinking that that's actually kind of coming from underneath, like the sheet, and it kind of goes through it and then up and out?
That's true, at 1.84 degrees. So it's just slightly off the ecliptic coming from the south. Okay, so it's going to break through the plane on 9/11 and then be in the north as it's coming around the sun. And the bad part is on 9/26 specifically, that's my warning video that I sent out, that's the day that this object and the Earth are both going to be on the celestial plane. So that on September 23rd is the day that the ecliptic and the celestial planes intersect, and this object is going to have a 0-0 declination on 9/26 on the same exact day that it passes directly between the Earth and the sun. That means that this star is going to pass directly through the gravity trough and through the magnetic portals that connect the sun and the Earth together. So those magnetic portals are going to be broken, and this star is going to stand in position to wrestle polarity control of the Earth from the sun. That's when we expect that this pole shift people have been talking about, that's when we expect that it's going to happen. And the North Pole is going to be repelled by the star so that the northern hemisphere sees about 10 days of darkness. The Earth's going to continue spinning, but the southern hemisphere is going to be facing the two stars in the solar storms that are going to be massive by then. And the northern hemisphere is going to be facing away to experience about 10 days of darkness. Then as the star passes to our right, then the Earth is going to lean over to the left, because imagine a spinning top, okay, and it's magnetic. And the sun is a giant magnet, and it's controlling our polarity. Well, this other magnet that's medium sized is going to come in between us, and it's going to take polarity control for a period of time, only because it has position. Then it's going to push the North Pole backwards, and as it passes, then the North Pole is going to lean away because it's actually being repelled, you see. So as this star goes by, then the sun is going to, about 10 days later, is going to wrestle polarity control back from this other star, and the Earth is going to experience a reverse pole shift and go back to about the position that it's in right now. That's what the data appears to be saying right now. Now, another problem is that we're not even at our nearest encounter yet. The nearest encounter is October the 17th, whenever this object is 0.232 AU away, or about 21 million miles. Now, these magnetic portals that stretch between that star and the Earth are going to be getting shorter and shorter and shorter with each day leading up to October the 17th, and that means that they're growing in width. So imagine an umbilical cord that's connected to us. Okay, so as that cord gets shorter and it gets closer to us and it gets wider, and it's able to inject its magnetism into us. The massive magnetism is what's heating up the Earth core. Okay, since 2004, this thing has been connected to the Earth through magnetic portals. That's why our magnetic North Pole has been migrating.
Yeah, I have heard about that.
Right. That's why the airports are moving their landing strips and everything. It's because of this object is trying to make the Earth one of its orbitals. It's trying to make us a satellite.
And you know, this is the question, and I'm sure a lot of people listening might have this question too. Now, this thing, they've seen moons around it. Now, I don't know, you know, like I say, I'm no expert, but I've never heard of a comet that has moons. So, I mean, that's correct, right? There are moons orbiting around this?
Yes. There appears to be 7. There's a red one, there's several blue ones, and there's some white ones. The red one is coming out at 3 o'clock. The blue ones are coming out at 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock, and the white ones appear to be coming up from the top about 11 and 12 o'clock.
Now, is it possible that it could pull us into its orbital?
No. That really is going to depend on the mass ratio, the difference in the size. So it depends. If this thing is half the size of the sun, it's possible because it's coming so near us, and it's going to have its hooks sunk into us at 21 million miles away. But the sun's very big, very, very big, and it's going to take polarity control back. We expect that the Earth is going to be pulled forward in orbit because we're going to have this giant gravity well. Your description was very good. Imagine you put a bowling ball in the middle of your king-size bed. That's the sun setting in a gravity well. Now, the Earth orbits around on the rim, just like the other planets that are on the ecliptic plane. Well, this other star is going to come between us, which is going to bring in what? Another gravity well, you see?
Yeah.
So as it passes between us, we're going to be falling into it. The reason that Greenland had sunrise 2 days early this year is because this gravity well that's approaching, so the Earth is trying to lean over into it. The migrating poles is because of the sun's reaction to this other object. So the Earth is trying to lean over into that well, and the sun, it has polarity control and it's pushing back. So that's causing the magnetic poles to migrate. It's actually migration, is not shifting. That's part of the cover story. They're trying to say the poles are shifting, but they're not. They're actually migrating because of the approach of this dwarf star.
And you know, this is you know, some of the symptoms that we're seeing, like Greenland, you know, getting daylight 2 days early. You know, they're up there for, you know, most people I'm sure know, you know, they have a certain amount of total darkness, and then I think probably, you know, complete daytime, kind of like Alaska. So they were scheduled, you know, to expect daylight, and it came 2 days early, which is really unusual. And that is part of the symptoms of how we know that whatever is out there is very large, has very large mass. There are certain things that are happening in our solar system and to our planet specifically that people are looking at and saying, well, you know, all these things happening together can only point to that there is something very big out there. Can you go over what some of the other symptoms are that people are looking at and kind of concluding by adding those together that this isn't a comet, but in fact something much bigger?
Yes. The biggest one is global warming itself is caused by the approach of this object. The whole thing that's going on with the politics and all that is all the cover story. Our entire solar system, all the planets, the sun is more active, everything because of another approaching star. This thing is connecting magnetic portals to all the bodies, trying to wrestle them to becoming part of one of its orbitals. Okay, so that's the biggest one. But then you've got the massive migrating animal deaths. The animals that have magnetite in their tissues are using the magnetic field in order to navigate. Whenever the magnetic field is collapsing or it's disturbed or things are turned around, then they're going in the wrong direction. So they're generally, like bees are not found. There's a problem with the bees, but they're not dead around their hives. So they're out getting food and they're getting lost.
Yeah, they're getting lost.
Okay, and other animals are they're migrating between food sources. So when they run out of food, their stomach tells them and their magnetism tells them where to go. Well, they head off in that direction, and guess what? They're lost. So they don't find their food source. And then the animal that eats them does not find their food source because they never showed up. So you have a geological implosion going on around the world because of the magnetosphere that's fluctuating because of this object. The superstorms that are happening is because of the ocean conveyor is broken. The regular weather patterns, the system is broken. And the harping that they're doing, use the scalar technology, the Tesla technology they're using, is they're trying to simulate weather by creating it, you see, so that you won't wake up to the fact that there's a dwarf star coming. Magnetic pole migration, the irregular weather, increased volcanoes, the increased magnetism is causing the Earth core to heat up, which is causing the increased seismicity. The earthquakes, the Earth's wobble, sunrise early, the Yellowstone bulging, all the calderas are bulging, and that's going to get much, much worse. Right now, we're stuck in what we're calling a 1.8 AU lull. We crossed orbit with this object on April the 25th, and imagine two sailboats, and one of them crosses in front of the other and on the same course. Now we're staying the same distance away for a little over 2 months, and so those magnetic portals are staying the same length, the same diameter, and the star cannot inject more magnetism into it. Even though it wants to, it can't, because we're actually getting a little bit further away from it now, which stretches the portals, and then it narrows the portal so it can't give us that magnetism. So the Earth changes that were increasing as we were both facing each other and we were coming towards each other. It was getting to be dramatic, but now we're going at the same direction. And so this lull period is going to continue until about the middle of July. And then all of a sudden, dramatically, the Earth is going to start changing on us. And that's what we need to prepare for. We got rogue tides. You got the airports changing their runways because of the magnetism. Increased solar radiation. The sinkhole activity is growing everywhere.
Yeah, I keep hearing about that a lot lately.
That's going to continue. It's the fluctuation with the water tables, the aquifers. Those are all shifting because of the presence of this other star. The compass readings is, again, because of the magnetism of the Earth. It's following the lines just like the animals, but they're messed up because of that. The solar flare activity. And there's really there's 25 symptoms that my friend Envy and I put together. It's on a video out there on YouTube, and it gives pretty much the same information. But this is basically what we're looking at, is the approach of another star, and it's being covered up by our government. So because they don't want to cause chaos. If everybody woke up today about this, then there would be mass pandemonium.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I think they would be better served to, try and prepare people. But I can see where, on one hand they don't want a complete breakdown of society, you know, before this thing gets into our orbit. And it would be very difficult to control people, I think, if they knew something like this was going on.
Absolutely. So we have these symptoms, and all of them point to a dwarf star coming. All of them do.
And just to go over a little bit, you know, the earthquakes, February 27th, this object was 6.042 AUs away from Earth. And, you know, AU, for those people who might not know, I found out it's and I'm sure Jerome knows, but it's the distance of one astronomical unit is exactly the distance from the Earth to the Sun. Now, is that right?
Yes, it's about 90, it's rounded off to about 93 million miles, so that's 1 AU.
Okay, and when this thing was at 6.042 AU, on that exact day, February 27, 2010, there was an earthquake in Chile. You probably remember it, 8.8. Then again, another alignment, September 4th, 2010, when it was 6.258 away from Earth. Christchurch, New Zealand had a 7.2 earthquake. And then on March 11th, 2011, the alignment, the AUs was 2.101, and there's a 9.0 earthquake. Now, what I find really interesting about this is that not only do the alignment dates match up with these tremendous earthquakes, but you can look at the distance, the astronomical units of how close it is in alignment, and the closer it is, the stronger the earthquakes are. And I think that says something. I think that says that, yeah, you know, this thing probably has a lot of mass to it. And, you know, I'm worried because, you know, when this thing, you know, passes by us, I mean, you know, could it have the ability to just break the planet apart?
No, it's not going to break the planet apart, but it's going to have its way with this for sure. It has the ability to flip us backwards because of the great magnetism, the polarity. So in other words, we're like a magnet, and this thing's like a magnet, and it has, we know we have a polarity conflict because the poles are migrating. So whenever it's directly between our planet and the sun, then this guy is going to want to push the North Pole backwards. That's why we think that, because the North Pole is moving much farther than the South Pole. So that's why we think the conflict is going to include in this episode that we're going to have with this object is that it's going to push the North Pole backwards. But then when we have another alignment, after all this other bad stuff happens and all the tectonic plates are floating on top of the magma, then we have another alignment on November 22nd that, like you're describing, but this thing is only 0.58 AU away, half the distance of the sun.
And then I know that some people are talking about once it actually does pass by us and like starts to begin its ascent, you know, up and out, basically, you know, it's in front of us, basically. So then we are kind of floating through where it used to be, and some people are saying that it may have a debris tail. And the other concern I have is that you know, it has moons around it. And has anyone calculated, you know, the orbits or trajectories of these moons? Is it possible that we're going to be hit by, you know, a moon satellite of this planet, which, because it's so large, could actually even be maybe the size of our planet? Or is our moon going to be affected by this, because it is coming quite close?
Yes, it's coming quite close. And during the alignment on 9/26, we actually have a new moon. So this thing, we have an alignment with the moon too, and it's on the same side as these two stars. However, whenever you map the orbits of all these objects, then they cross only twice. And so the chances of us being hit by one of these is really astronomically low. The chances of us being hit, I'm not even concerned about us being hit by an object. I'm concerned about the gravitational effect, the magnetic effect of what it's going to have, because it's going to cause all the volcanoes on Earth are going to want to react. They're all going to be spewing out magma. All the tectonic plates are going to be floating, and then we're going to have these seismic events at the same time. So what's going to happen is a terraforming of this planet. Is what's going. I mean, I don't want to make people fearful. I'm not selling anything, you know, to try to scare people into buying anything. I'm just giving you the data as I see it from our investigation, actually. And I would like for you to carry out your own investigation. You know, I'm trying to lead you to the facts and And I'm showing you the evidence so that you can draw your own conclusions. Okay, so, but this is what the data says. This is what the science says is going to happen. And the only way I know to prepare for it is to join large survival groups, get yourself a lot of food, and get yourself into a cavern with water. And look to be there for a 3 to 4 month period, beginning in August, the beginning of August, and it could be longer than that, even into December. And you need to bring plenty of seeds with you and plenty of food to live on until you can plant those seeds and have a 3 months later you have a harvest. And unfortunately, that's the only solution that I see to the threats that's coming with this object, is to prepare. We recognize what the threats are, we create the contingencies, and then we execute those plans. And it includes a cavern in hiding from this thing, because it's going to be a terrible thing that happens. Then, if we have an extended camping trip and things are not as bad, then, we're okay. But if we don't plan and this does turn out to be that bad, then this is an extinction level event we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea. And really, people should kind of, know who's around them or where they should be going in case of any emergency, And I know that, especially with the description of the place, moving and there's earthquakes and being in a cave doesn't sound especially safe or especially ideal, but it's kind of better than a lot of alternatives. And especially if you're grouped up with other people, you can't really, in extreme events, whether it's something like this or, even, an earthquake or by itself or, some kind of weather emergency or terror emergency, you should always have people who kind of have your back at least, who know where you are so they can, try and find you or know where they're supposed to meet you at in case of an emergency. It's always good to have a contingent, a plan. And with something like this, something that we can see or we have a real good idea that it's there, it's a good idea to start a plan, as soon as possible and start looking into maybe groups in your area. And what areas, Terrell, do you think are safest in the United States?
The safest zone in the United States by far are the Ozarks in western Missouri and Arkansas, because they're on a stable plate that will shake a little bit, but it's not going to destroy the few nuclear power plants that are there. I recently had to downgrade the Appalachian and the entire eastern seaboard to unsafe because of what's going to happen with the New Madrid fault. The New Madrid fault is going to begin shaking, and it's going to liquefy the entire central United States. The salt dome that's located down Louisiana way is going to melt, and gravity is going to pull the entire Midwest down into the Gulf to be displaced by water, so that becomes an inland Gulf. What that's going to do is unlock the fault system that's currently locked together over in the eastern seaboard, and that's going to begin shaking wildly. And there's far, far too many nuclear power plants over there. And so the entire region now is unsafe. The Northeast is unsafe. The reason they're unsafe up there is if you look at New York and the way it's shaped in the ocean, whenever the pole shift happens, then the water is going to pile there, and there's not enough altitude. And so the water is going to go right over into the Great Lakes. And there's no safe zone there. You need to get south of the nuclear power plants, and the only place that I know to send people is to the Ozarks. Unfortunately, I wish I had a better place to send them. Unless you want to go into the central part of Canada, into the western part of Canada, then that would be good too. But you have to find caverns there at elevation with water.
And for example, I'm in Michigan, so I'm right near the Great Lakes. Now, is this? I know there are maps out there. It looks as though people who are familiar with the Great Lakes, that they are coming down and cutting through the country, down through, I think, Louisiana and maybe Texas there. So do you think that, because I believe where I'm at in Michigan is actually about above 650 feet altitude and above sea levels, and I'm wondering, is it safe here, or should I, will we be underwater?
It's not safe. I wish I could say it's safe, but it's not safe. You have too much water there. The world's going to be shaking around. It's going to be a bathtub effect. The salt water is going to come from the ocean because of the funneling effect over by New York. You're going to have a lot more water there than you have right now. Believe me, a lot more. Then to your south, the northern edge of that zone, you've got 9 nuclear power plants that you're downwind of. Only one of them has to melt down, you see. You're going to have a Japan situation. So you need to be south of, so the prevailing winds are carrying this stuff away from you, that's the Ozarks, you see. And the problem with the western United States is the big caldera out there is going to blow. It's already trying. I mean, the trees are already underwater because of the bulging.
And that's Yellowstone?
Yes. And whenever this thing gets closer, then it's going to cause that to bulge until it finally breaks. So the magma in these domes are becoming lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter as they're getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Well, there's no relief valve for Yellowstone. The giant caldera in northern Europe, there's no relief valve. You're seeing these volcanoes blowing all over the world. That's going to get way worse, but there's no relief valve for some of them. That's these super calderas like Yellowstone. And so whenever they do break, by the time they break, the magma is going to be so light that it's going to cause a dam effect. In other words, the hole's going to poke through, and then the entire region is going to begin falling, and then the hole is going to become as large as the state of Nevada.
Wow.
Okay, and what happens is that the Pacific Ocean breaks through and then washes the entire state of California into the empty hole. And so if you look at the Casey maps, you're going to see a gigantic inland sea over there because he recognized the fact that the caldera is going to blow. And when it does, it's going to wash away it's going to wash away the whole state of California. Okay, so not only that particular caldera has the glassy pyroclastic clouds that come out of it that killed, when the last time it blew, it killed animals around the world. Because when you get one lung full, then your lungs fill up with the glass and it recrystallizes and it kills you instantly out of that particular caldera. So there's no safe zone around it. 1,000 miles around it, there's no safe zone because you don't know which way the wind's blowing whenever the Earth's flipping around. So you need to be away from the northwest.
And let's say you were out of, far away enough that you wouldn't be affected by the magma or the sinking, but yet the caldera blows, and there's this, glass in the air. Is there a way that you could, and you got trapped there, could you put on a gas mask, or would it just shred right through it?
You're going to have no chance to survive there. It's going to be zero chance to survive. If you're anywhere around that cloud, if you see that cloud, then you're done because you just won't be able to escape it. It's going to pile up as high as your body after this thing blows. You're way too close. Parts of this is going to go around the world. Okay, the reason it's not an ELE event in itself is because the Pacific Ocean is going to put it out. But you cannot be in that area. It is not safe. It is not safe. You need to get to a place like the Ozarks. I know everybody can't go there, but you need to use the model that we're using. In my video, the survival video that's online, use the model to find yourself a cavern with water with a large group that's away from the northwest and away from the northeast. So if you divide the country into 3 parts, the center section is the one that's safe. And it's set the farther south you go into the plateau of the Ozarks, the better off you're going to be. That's the safest, most stable, with the most caverns, with the most water, and there's already survival groups there. There's already ways to join groups that are there. That's where people need to be looking towards. If they can possibly get there, that's the safest place in the United States.
Okay, and I've been getting a lot of calls tonight. I normally don't take calls, but I think because of the volume of calls that keep coming in, I'm going to grab a couple. We don't have a lot of time. We have a lot of information to go over, but, I am curious about, what people are thinking. Would you mind taking a call or two?
Oh, happy to.
Okay, great. Let's see if I can pull them up here. Hello, you're on the air with Nixie LaRue and Terrell. Can you hear us?
Hello.
Hi.
Yes.
Do you have a question?
Hi, Terrell. I've been doing my own research on Ulanen for a while now. I've been observing it with a telescope and infrared sensitive camera, and I also recently conducted a test simulation to see what a brown dwarf would do to the configuration of the inner solar system if it were on Yellen's orbit. In fact, I tested using just a minimum mass brown dwarf with 13 times Jupiter's mass, which is the minimum definition for a brown dwarf. And the end result was that at perigee, Earth would be ejected from the solar system completely, or at least near completely, enough to deep freeze it way beyond the habitable zone. And my own observations of the comet in infrared show that it's not that bright in infrared. It's just the typical comet-looking object, sort of green and extremely dim.
Okay.
Terrell, do you want to?
So I just want.
But yeah, I work with a lot of astronomers, and what you're saying, the research group we have now, we've been working with astronomers, giving them data, giving them the coordinates, and having them bring us information. And we're about to be breaking something, it looks like, with our current group. More and more people are able to see what's out there, and it is not a comet. There's something else out there for sure, 100% for sure, and it's something that has large mass. And whenever our people see it, then they become very frightened of what they see.
Well, sure. And what I want to do too is you know, like I said, I'm not sure. I'm sure people can probably hear me. I'm not sure if they're hearing you, just because of how we had to. I had to end up calling back in, and you know, the lines are a little bit crossed over here, so to speak. So I want to make sure that everyone is hearing you. You know, I don't want them to miss it. So
yes, they're definitely hearing me. I'm hearing from our research group. They're listening to the show.
Okay, fantastic, because I just want to make sure that the information is getting out there. Now, I know that there was some talk. Listening, or you know, maybe wait until you're in a better frame of mind to listen to this show, because this information has already sent people into near breakdowns, seriously. So I also want to say that, you know, while podcasts are not without their issues, you know, I did listen to our guest tonight being interviewed on the show last. Okay, we're back on. And as I was saying, if you caught what I had said, is that we don't really have a backup, and that you're here to help us understand what it is, some of the astronomical data, and the implications, and kind of what we need to know in order to survive a catastrophe. And so, Terrell, I will go ahead and hand it off to you, but what I want to ask first really is for people who don't know anything about this, could you explain kind of, you know, the official explanation is that this is a comet. And, you know, if you could explain why we kind of know it isn't a comet, and, you know, before we get into, like, the trajectories and things, just so people know kind of what we're talking about and what astronomers are seeing, or more to the point, what they're not seeing out there.
Okay. The reason we know this is not a comet for sure is because of the seismicity that's associated with this object since 1965. Whenever you run the timeline back for this object using the Jet Propulsion Laboratory data, then you see a pattern of earthquakes that's being caused, not just earthquakes, but magnitude 6+ earthquakes. For example, on February 27th, 2010, we had the Chile quake, and the Earth axis shifted 3 inches, and the Earth aquifer shifted. And the same thing happened on March 11th with the Japan quake. Earth axis shifted 4 inches, and the Earth aquifer shifted again the same exact way, and exactly on L&N alignments with the Earth. So in other words, whenever Earth passed between the Sun and this object, we had those events. And so Minshur Amabashich, in his paper, seismicity, he did the research, and he has shown us when you go back in time that this has happened before, and so we're seeing a pattern. And in my research, I tried to explain it a different way with another object like Jupiter or Saturn or something, and I have no other explanation for it except for this L&N object, which has to have great mass in order to create these events. And then we have the problem that we cannot see it. And if we can't see it and it has great mass, then it must be one of about three things, and it can only be about three things. It's either a brown dwarf star, or it's a black dwarf star, or it's some kind of black hole anomaly. And so in our research, I've said in many groups studying this since January, an Astral Patriots research group, and that evolved into the
system here. And so if I get dropped, then I can't really get back on. Now, I was dropped, but fortunately my Skype saved it. I was able to get back in. So hopefully we won't have any more problems. And like I was saying, this is exactly the type of thing that was happening last night on the show. So it's a little strange. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get our guest on the line. Again, we might have more problems there. Let's hope not. So I'm going to go ahead and throw some music on, and we'll see if we can't work this out. Hold on one second.
Yes, coming in loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm hoping that the listeners can hear you, too. I had to get through to you on a different way that I perhaps normally would. I had some problems with the show, you know, and it was uncanny because I was just talking about how when I listened to the show last night, they were having some problems, too.
Right.
So it's pretty unusual. But I have explained a little bit about what is coming, and I've kind of forewarned everyone that this is pretty serious information.